Well, I welcome everyone. I'm so happy to see everybody tonight. Edpo, thank you so much again for coming to the webinar this evening. So before we start, could you just briefly introduce yourselves? Oh, here's Jogo. Okay, he's coming in here next. Just briefly introduce yourselves and tell everybody where you are and who you work for. Hello, Jogo. How are you?
Hello, how are you doing? I'm fine.
Very good. Okay. Gabriel, I'll start with you. Introduce yourself, please.
So, my name is Gabriel. I'm from Brazil and I live in Dobrada. It's a small town here in Brazil, in the state of São Paulo. I'm a
Okay.
student, and that's it.
Okay. Okay. Nina, next is over to you.
Hi, I'm Nina. I'm semi-retired from the UN, and I'm living in New York City right now.
Okay. Thanks very much. Carla?
Hi, my name is Carla. I live in Brazil too, Matão City specifically. And I work at programmers with HR.
Mhm.
And I think that's it.
Okay. Daniel?
Hey, good evening. I'm Daniel Silva. I work with Train. I am maintenance technician, and I intend to will go change of country.
And Daniel, are you in Brazil now?
Yes, I live Brazil now.
What city?
I'm living São Paulo.
São Paulo. Okay.
Yeah.
And Jogo?
Hi, everybody. My name is Diogo. I work with finance in Campinas, São Paulo, the same company that Carla. Nice to see you, Carla.
And Gabrielle. Okay. And finally, Edpo, I'm going to turn everything over to you at this point. There may be some other people who come in, but I'm not going to stop you and have you introduce. So, Edpo, again, thank you so much for coming this evening. You should have complete access to sharing your screen, and over to you. You're muted at Edpo. I can't hear you.
Yes, I know that.
There we
I'm
go.
just sharing my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yep,
Okay.
you can see.
So good evening, everybody. My name is Edpo. I'm also Brazilian from São Paulo. Not exactly from São Paulo, from a small town near São Paulo, but yeah, it's easier to refer it as São Paulo. And I live in Washington, D.C. today. I moved 2 years ago, I think, and I work for the World Bank as a transport specialist, basically focused on rail and metro projects in South Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and some support for Africa and East Pacific countries. So thanks, Michael, for the opportunity to speak here today. I think my challenge today is try to explain in few minutes, in few slides, how the World Bank works and its role in the global issues without being very, very technical. So without any further ado, let's get into business. Let me try to change. Okay. So, okay. The World Bank was founded in 1944, just 1 year before the end of the Second World War, as the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, IBRD, as we can see here in the first circle on the presentation. And at that time, the World Bank was focused on infrastructure and reconstruction of countries after the devastated results of the World War. But later, the objective shifted from reconstruction to development, and other 4 institutions have been created over this time. Today, the World Bank is a group formed by five institutions. So the first one is, again, IBRD, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, that lends money to governments of middle and low-income countries. The second is IDA, International Development Association, that provides financing on highly concessional terms to government of the poorest countries. Here we are not talking about middle and low-income countries, we are talking about poorest countries. Then we have IFC, the International Finance Corporation, that provide loans, guarantees, equity, advisory services, and so on for the private sector when engaged in public projects. Then we have MIGA, the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency, that provides political risk insurance and credit enhancement guarantees. And finally, we have the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes that works with conciliation and arbitration of investment disputes. So the bank has an active presence all across the globe. And our biggest portfolio today is in Africa, followed by Latin America and the Caribbean region. In total, we have slightly over 100 billion US dollars in commitment globally, and this is 2022 figure. So the World Bank as a group today has two main goals that guides our actions and strategies and so on. And they are end extreme poverty and promote shared prosperity. It seems very vague and broad at first sight, but we'll see along the presentation how these principles have been applied in real life. And the way the World Bank works toward these goals is by providing low-interest loans, or in some cases, interest-free credits and grants to developing countries for education, health, infrastructure, and so on. So basically, the World Bank lends money to its member countries at concessional rates, which is the same as saying low interest rates. We have one of the lowest available interest rates globally. But we use this money to push these countries to implement reforms and change in a way that we believe will help these countries to achieve the twin goals, that is, end poverty and share prosperity. So going one step forward here into the business model, and I will try to use a very, very simplified framework to explain this in just a few steps, but the process is much more complex than this framework. It starts with a formal request from the Minister of Finance of a member country. So the World Bank only lends money to federal government. It does not mean that the state government cannot use our money. They can use, but to do so, they have to go through the federal government. In Brazil, for example, if a state government wants to borrow from the World Bank, it has first to require approval from the federal government, and then the federal government will enter into an agreement with the World Bank on behalf of the state government. In the case of Brazil, there's in place a very well-established institutional framework to guide this process, but it varies from country to country, and we see other countries where this process is not very well structured and so on. But then coming back to the framework, once we receive the formal request from the Minister of Finance, we first analyze it to check if the concept of this project is aligned with the World Bank values and principles. So we do not simply finance infrastructure by infrastructure, we finance transformative projects, and by transformative, I mean projects that has the potential to change and improve people's life. And in this phase, we have to prepare an internal document called Project Concept Note that will be reviewed and approved internally, and then we can formally start the engagement with the country or the state government and so on. So even when the concept is proven to be aligned with the bank principle, every project has to comply with our environmental and social safeguards and our procurement guideline. So this is mandatory and it supersedes every domestic laws. In other words, the World Bank requirements for environmental and social safeguards and procurements are stronger than national laws, and every member country has to comply with our requirements on top of domestic laws. Most of the times, our requirements are more stringent than national ones, but if the country wants to use our money, they have to do it on our way, so they have to comply with our policies. And finally, we have World Bank and country priorities that we apply to the project itself in a project basis. A very fresh example is a commuter rail line that we are financing in India, where we are pushing the government to adopt a number of measures for gender inclusiveness, because this is a huge problem in India, where almost 90% of the women reported some kind of harassment when using public transportation means. And the lack of safety is also the major reason for them not to use public transportation. So we are using this project to implement change that can be replicated and scaled up to existing metro lines, and to help the country to fix a structural problem that goes far beyond transportation itself. And here is also important to highlight that we are not just sitting here waiting for requests from member countries. We keep a continuous dialogue with every member country. We monitor the economic and political situation. We provide technical assistance. And most of the times, these requests come from a diagnostic that the bank has produced in the past. So the country agrees in moving forward to address an identified gap and so on. We do not have political side. Our diagnostic is always based on technical criteria. So again, in the case of Brazil, we were engaged with the previous government, and now with the changing administration, we sit down with the new government, we presented our diagnostics and our proposed to approach for the agenda to move forward and so on. Well, today the World Bank as a group that's nearly every sector that is important to fighting poverty, supporting economic growth, and ensuring sustainability gains in the quality of people's life in developing country. We have teams and experts working with agriculture, education, energy, financial sector, healthy industry, trade, information and communication, public administration, water and sanitation, transportation, and social protection. So we basically cover all subsectors in infrastructure. And then coming to the climate change agenda, why the World Bank so focused on the climate change agenda is that when we look to the unfolding impacts of the climate change, there's a straight correlation between the World Bank goals and the climate change. First, because climate change could push up to 130 million people into the poverty line over the next 10 years, which goes exactly in the opposite direction of our goals and has a huge potential to jeopardize the progress that we have made on reducing poverty over the past years. Secondly, because the 74 poorest countries in the world are responsible for less than 1/10 of the global greenhouse gas emissions. But in contrast, they have been hardest hit by climate change disasters. And these disasters directly affect the poorest and the most vulnerable, who has the least capacity to quickly recover from these disasters. So when a poor family has its house destroyed by a climate disaster, for example, they cannot rebuild their asset easily, and this event will push them back to the poverty line and will jeopardize the progress that the family has made. Only in the last decade, the number of natural disasters in these countries increased 8-fold. And the bottom line here is that in one side, we have the developed countries that are the largest contributors in terms of emissions. And on the other side, we have the underdeveloped countries that aspire to become a developed country in the future. But if they follow the same pathway as of developed countries, we'll have a perfect storm very, very shortly. So the climate change requires the cooperation of the global community as a whole in a way that developed countries can support and finance the development of the rest of the world, following a sustainable track and not jeopardizing the development of the underdeveloped. And this is the biggest challenge. So this slide just put into perspective the current global emission landscape, and we can quickly recognize how development and emissions go hand in hand. Here we can see the US and China as the first and second biggest emitters. We can also see that Brazil, India, and Russia are somewhere in the halfway. They are not the largest contributors, especially considering the territorial extension of these countries, but they are also far from being at the bottom. And finally, we can see Africa, that has been suffering a lot with climate effects, but does not contribute much to the problem in terms of emissions. And that's why we saw in the last COP27, African countries pushing the developed and richer countries for more support, for more financial support, for them to develop, to fight poverty, but at the same time to go in a sustainable track. So recently, the World Bank has launched the Climate Change Action Plan with the purpose of transitioning from investing in green projects to greening entire economies. And it consists basically of 3 pillars. The first is the country climate and development reports that we call CCDRs. Most of our member countries don't have a clue from where to start when tackling the climate change issue. They recognize it, they are willing to move this agenda forward, but they need help. So we are producing these CCDRs. This is country and sector-wise, and this is aimed to help countries on taking informed decisions and setting priorities in terms of investments, policies, actions, and so on. If you are curious, it's free and it's available on our website. Secondly, we have a target of committing at least 35% of our portfolio towards the climate agenda. But most importantly, the bank will only finance projects aligned with the Paris alignment. And in practice, it means that we are imposing serious restrictions to projects that generate emissions. The classical example here are coal power plants or highway expansions that incentivizes the use of private cars. Of course, when we talk about roads, there are different shades of gray. We still finance road safety, the improvement of safety in existing roads. We still finance rural roads and connectivities to connect communities far away from society into the society. But we definitely want to phase out the use of private vehicles and internal combustion energy vehicles where possible. And finally, here's a little bit more technical. We strongly believe that the public sector by itself cannot afford the climate transition, both in terms of budget, in monetary terms, but also in terms of pace. So we have no choice but relying on the private sector to scale up and to penetrate in this transition. The majority of the underdeveloped countries do not have investment rating, so they are unable to access the global capital markets. Of course, it happens for a reason, and for a set of reasons, I would say. In one hand, there is the upstream environment, and here I'm talking about having clear sectoral regulations, political stability, fiscal capacity, conflict resolution mechanisms, and so on. This country still lacks these mechanisms there. And on the other hand, we have the project itself. I mean, the quality of the project, they still need capacity building to put together better projects, higher quality projects to be bankable and financeable in the capital markets. So in addition to that, the bank offers different kinds of instruments and guarantees to backstop these countries in contractual obligations when they're assuming viability gap funds in PPP contracts or I don't know, gross cost contracts. I'm not trying to use these technical terms, but I can't find another terms to put it off. And then when the bank support the country with these instruments, the bank is also putting the AAA, the maximum risk rate that the World Bank has, into this country, so the country can access the global market at better terms, in terms of period, in terms of interest rates and availability of lenders. But then how the transport sector fits into this broad strategy and the climate change agenda and so on. I work especially with the transport, right? So first, because transport is at the center of the development agenda. Transport provides accessibility to jobs, education, opportunities, and so on. Transport is also crucial for domestic logistics, for global supply chain. It has a very important role in global food security and so on. Second, because transport is part of the problem, and you can only be part of the solution if you are part of the problem. So emissions from transport have more than doubled over the last 50 years. Today, transport is the second largest contributors to climate change emissions. And in the business as usual scenario, emissions from transport will increase faster than any other sector up to 2050. We can see here in the graph how the number of vehicles in low and middle income countries are expected to skyrocket, while developed countries seems to have reached the stabilization point. Developed countries are also expected to lead the introduction of electric vehicles, which can at some point curtail emissions. And as opposed of underdeveloped countries, developed countries also have great mass transportation systems in place where people can use instead of using private vehicles. And finally, the transport alone accounts for 20% of total greenhouse gas emissions. And if no action is taken, it can reach as much as 60% by 2050. So here is a quick video of how transport is inserted in this agenda and how transport is important for the climate and the development agenda. I think it takes only 2 minutes and hopefully you can see and hear it.
Mobility defines the human race. For millions of years, we have traveled the planet, settling one day, moving on the next. Transport modes have rapidly evolved, increasing in speed, autonomy, reliability. They make us go faster and farther every day. But mobility is not immune to the urgent challenges of this world. More people, more cars, a changing climate. The mobility choices of today will either lock us in congestion and pollution, or they will open the way for new possibilities. Access for all, efficiency, safety, and climate respect. Sustainable mobility for all is not a dream, but it requires a revolution. These 4 goals, mutually reinforcing, will enable people and goods to continue moving better and faster, improving the health, the environment, the lives of billions, and helping stabilize climate change. We see a future of efficient and accessible mass transit, buses that move people quickly through busy cities, trains that levitate, commuters in the air and on waterways. We see solar roadways, electric cars, cars that drive themselves, freight that moves on trains, on boats, in airships. We see real-time traffic communication, a rise in time-efficient movement. We see dedicated bike lanes, bike shares, walking paths, access to jobs, schools, markets, a transportation environment that works for everyone. We all have a stake in this future. We all need to play a role in making it happen. Transforming the world's mobility requires a vision, bold actions, a global coalition. Sustainable mobility for all is not a dream. It is a revolution.
Cool.
And then we have some figures as of 2022. So the World Bank approved it in this fiscal year. And just for clarification, a fiscal year here in the World Bank starts from June 2021 to July 2022. So it follows the American year, American fiscal years. That's why we are referring to fiscal year 22 as a concluded year. So the bank approved 14 new transport projects totaling $8.3 billion. Today we have 176 active projects in transport.
Wow.
And all the projects approved include climate co-benefits. So we have to go through a screening process. We have to develop economic analysis for every project, and we have to show the benefits, not the financial benefits, the economic benefits of a given project. So let's say when we are implementing a metro line, we have to demonstrate that it will reduce the number of cars in the streets. And because of this reduction, we reduce the numbers of accidents, we reduce the costs on maintenance of roads, we reduce the time spent on traffic, we reduce emissions, and we have to monetize all of these reductions. And then we have to come to a minimum threshold of economic internal rate of return for the project to be approved in the bank. So this is exactly what I do here in the bank, this economic analysis of projects. And we have on average 65 advisory services and analytical reports only for transport delivered every single year in all member countries. Okay, so finally, I just brought three examples of transformative projects and rail programs that I'm involved to. The first is the Indian Eastern Dedicated Freight Corridor. So India has a very large rail infrastructure there because of the British colonization and so on. But their infrastructure are very well saturated. And then we are creating new and dedicated freight corridors, because today the infrastructure is shared between passenger and freight transportation. So we are creating exclusively freight transportation corridors so we can free up space for more passenger services, and we can provide a higher quality freight service in this dedicated freight corridor. This is the biggest infrastructure project ongoing in the world, and the bank has been involved there for almost 10 years. We have the commuter rail lines in Brazil, CPTM, where Daniel works actually. So the World Bank has been involved with São Paulo government since the destatization in the 90s. So the World Bank financed the acquisition of new trains, the World Bank financed new signaling systems, modernization of stations, and so on. And finally, we have the high-speed rail network in China, with today's the biggest high-speed rail network in the world, and the World Bank also provided technical assistance and loans for the Chinese to implement part of this network. It was not only the World Bank, it's a very extensive network, but the World Bank was part of it. Nice. And with that, I finished my presentation, Mike. I was given 20 minutes, and I think I reached that.
Well, that's
right?
perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. Well, yeah, I think I have questions, but I want to see if anybody else has questions, because I always feel like you should be talking because you're the ones who are learning English. So, does anyone have any questions for Edpo before I ask? Okay, I'll ask them maybe. Oh, go ahead, Daniel. Did you have a question?
I would like to ask something. Thank you very much for our presentation. I like very much the material, the content you had presented. And for curiosity, do you have business with countries that focus the investment on fix poverty and hunger directly, or the most part of your business related to development countries, something like that?
No, yeah, we have 189 member countries, so the biggest part of the world is pertain to the World Bank, and we help both agendas, the development and the poverty reduction agenda. So we truly believe that development is the right way to fight poverty, because you are fighting poverty and you are sharing prosperity at the same time. But we are also involved in poverty reduction. I think our friends from the United Nations are more involved directly on poverty reduction, and the International Monetary Fund as well, because they provide money and direct assistance for these countries in terms of debt and so on. And we are more in the infrastructure side, but yes, we are involved with the poverty reduction as well.
Nice.
Very good.
Anyone else have a question? I have a very simple question, and then I have a couple other ones too. How did you get this job, Edpo? How does one get a job with the World Bank? I mean, like, how does a Brazilian guy get a job and live in Washington, D.C. and work at the World Bank?
When I was in São Paulo, I used it to work for the São Paulo government, for CPTM, where Daniel works today. But part of my journey there was working in the São Paulo Transportation Metropolitan Authority. And I was the coordinator of two big PPP projects in São Paulo. One was structured by the World Bank, actually by IFC, the financial arm of the World Bank. And the second one was structured by ADB, the Inter-American Development Bank, which headquarters is also here in Washington, D.C. And they are multilateral banks, they're all connected and so on. And then, things happen, the rest is history, I think. I got the invitation to work here. The bank doesn't have many rail specialists, and the rail agenda has growing very, very fast because of this climate agenda and so on. And yes, that's part of the history.
Okay, that's nice. It's nice. And I have another question based on something you said during your presentation, and you used the example of the changeover in government in Brazil, a recent changeover in government. You had negotiated with the previous government for specific project, and how much do you have to go back to the beginning to present to the new government? Because I'm sure there may be some things that they don't necessarily agree with in terms of what the previous administration negotiated, whether it was price or whether it was the scope of the project or whether it was the direction of the project. How do you kind of make that come together again, Edpo,
it depends on the transition between the previous government and the current government. We do not negotiate price. We have our price is set, it's public. You can see in the World Bank website. So price is something that we do not negotiate, but we do negotiate scope. With this new government, we haven't reached this point. So we had the first round of meetings. We presented the agenda. We presented our diagnostic. But they are just putting together the government. They are setting up new institutions and so on. So we haven't came to this point. But I don't think the biggest outline will change, because they are very well established. I mean, the bank only enters into a project when we truly believe that this is transformative and this is the right pathway for the country. And we have a lot of reports, a lot of research, a lot of work to backstop our decision. And if we are in this project, even the new government, even if they are opposition and they have different views, it's very difficult to go against all of this, literature and all of the academic research that we did before entering in a project. So I don't think it will be a big problem in Brazil. And it happens not only in Brazil. Brazilians used to think that this is only a Brazilian issue, but it happens all across the world. We see the same problems that we are seeing in Brazil in many other countries. And today that I know a lot of countries and I talk to a lot of governments, I can see that Brazil is in a very good position in spite of our perception that Brazil is delayed or underdeveloped. We are not. Brazil is a very, very nice country. But I didn't have this perception when I was living in Brazil and before joining the bank.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have any questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
Can I question about English? And it's very difficult to get used to English. And honestly, I am bad English. I have a bad English. And I didn't understand most of the lecture.
Mhm.
But what I understand, I told was really cool. And my English is bad. So I think, no, I would like know which about English. It's very difficult get used.
I mean, Leticia, you're doing great, much better than your dad. Just for everyone knows, Daniel is Leticia's father. That's why I'm joking.
I was wondering because I didn't recognize Leticia. And I was like, oh.
I'm still not happy with my English. That's why I'm studying here with Michael, but it takes a long time. I've been studying English for more than 10 years. I live in the UK. Now I live in the US for more than 2 years. I have to use English every day, and I keep studying every day. It's difficult. I see people living here for more than 10 years that aren't able to speak English properly, fluently, and so on. So it requires a lot of effort, a lot of time. So be patient, keep going, you get there.
Yeah, and Leticia, let me say that I admire how brave you are to ask a question. Even though and being brave and being fearless, and I'm going to speak a little Portuguese here, sem medo. Okay, you understand? Okay, that's really a big key for learning the languages. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And so far so good. Edpo is absolutely correct, and his English is quite good. And I was listening to him during the presentation today because he and I've worked together, and I was picking out little things. Not that I couldn't understand him, but they were just non-standard, Leticia, non-standard. That takes a lot of time and a lot of work. And my friend Andre, who you guys didn't meet in the beginning, he's another guy who speaks English really well, but he wants to be really, really, really high, and it takes a lot of work. He's doing the work. He's putting in the time and doing the work. So that's the answer to your question, Leticia, and it's very nice. And again, I applaud your bravery for asking the question. You know, very, very good. So good. Does anyone else have any questions for Edpo?
Very thank you for words. I am so happy.
Well, good. Congratulations again, and good luck with your studies, Leticia. Really good luck with your studies. Well, if no one else has any questions, I just want to thank Edpo. Can you tell everybody where you're going tomorrow? What your upcoming agenda is?
Yes, I'm going to Pakistan for 10 days, and then from Pakistan to India, and then from India to Turkish, and then back home. Yeah.
So he's got a, and so I'm very grateful for Edpo for taking some time out of his really busy schedule, and he does have a very busy schedule to do this webinar tonight and explain a bit about the World Bank. I'm very happy to know Edpo and work with him on occasion, because I've learned a lot about what he does and what the World Bank does, which is to try to like make it a better world. I always thought the World Bank was just like some place that like a lot of money came into. It was just like another bank, but they really have more of a humanitarian mission for that. And so I want to thank him for coming. And I also wanted to thank Nina for coming. and Nina doesn't have her camera on, but I'm going to give her a little commercial also. Nina, who is, as she said, semi-retired, but who spent her career, there she is. Hello, Nina. Nina is going to be our next presenter, okay? And Nina's going to be presenting at the end of February. We haven't fixed a date yet. We have to arrange that. But Nina spent her career working for the United Nations, and similarly to Edpo, helping people and conflict resolutions and going in with peacekeepers and stuff. Really some fascinating stuff that she's done in her time working for the UN, which is, again, an organization that everybody knows about, the United Nations, but a lot of people don't really realize how much they do, or all of the different things about the UN. So I will, when we fix a date for Nina's webinar, we will, of course, advertise it, and we hope that that you guys can join us at that time. As I said, it'll be towards the end of February, and I hope we see you again. Daniel, it was very nice to meet you, and your daughter is very impressive. So good for you. Leticia, how old are you?
15.
I have 15.
15. Wow, good for you. Wow, congratulations.
Yes.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, very impressive.
Thank you, Mr. Michael.
Congratulations. Yeah.
I'm proud for her.
Yes, you should be.
She's learning English, and she's improving her English every day and every second. I'm proud. I'm so proud.
Oh.
And today I wish watch and more learning about World Bank.
Mhm.
But I care about sustainability.
Yeah.
And I hope this investment here one day, please, because these days I watch a video about a locomotive hydrogen powered, and fantastic, very fantastic in another country. But in this moment, Brazil, step by step, we need waiting more investment, who is in the future we can go in the high tech.
Yeah, it takes time. Developing countries are developing, it takes a long time. It takes a long time to develop. So again, let me thank you all for coming tonight, and I will have this video available if you want to watch it again. Certainly, I know that there are some of our students in Europe who it's a bit late for, and so they will get a chance to watch it. But again, thank you all for coming tonight. Edpo, I want to say thanks a million for a great presentation, and I wish you safe travels, my friend. Okay, and good luck. Oh, hello, Isminia. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine.
Okay, and Ismania, where are you? Do you know somebody here? How are you here? It's nice to see you. And Edpo, good luck again. With your business there, and I look forward to talking to you later. And again, I will have the video probably in a day or two up there. It was nice to see you. Leticia, Daniel, very nice to meet you. Nina, a pleasure to have you here. And Isminia, nice to see you. And have a good night, everybody. Okay?
A good night, Michael.
Yep, ciao, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you, Edpo.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, guys.
The pleasure is mine.